Thank you, everyone, for joining the DocShop Pro webinar this evening. A few housekeeping notes while folks get set up. I see a few people still logging in and getting configured as we speak here. Everyone is muted. Questions can be submitted as we go, and you can utilize the chat throughout. This webinar will be recorded for future distribution as well. Tonight's topic is launch a new practice or ignite the growth of your purchase practice. Leading us this evening is Rem Jackson, CEO of Top Practices, and Dr. John Juliana of Nemo Health. We'll talk about DocShop Pro in just a bit. We've got a lot of information here tonight. We want to be sure there's plenty of time for additional Q&A at the end. So we're going to jump right into it. Leading us off tonight is Dr. John Juliana, a doctor of podiatric medicine, an experienced national speaker, author, and co-host of the Essential Adaptations podcast. He's a renowned practice management consultant and executive vice president at Nemo Health. John, I'm excited to get started, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. I'm going to take my glasses off so I could actually see the screen tonight. That's the curse of getting old, of course. So if you'll just that's perfect, Greg, right there. You know, as we get started here, I'd like to talk about some fundamentals. In my mind, there are 4 crucial steps to launching a medical practice. And I'm going to cover each of these steps, some of which actually will serve as a perfect segue to what my good friend Rem Jackson is going to be talking about in just a little bit. So if you'll advance the next slide, Greg. Step 1 really involves, of these 4 steps, step 1 involves simply the what and the where. Where is basically, where do you want to practice? This should generally be a demographic that you're interested in living in and integrating into a community. You should perform actually a demographic study to really understand the population, their age, their employment, and perhaps even their employer-related healthcare coverage. Who are the other podiatrists in the community? What type of practice do they have? What are their ages? What's their training? The answer to these questions is going to help you understand the need for your services, not only presently, but even provide you with a predictive determination for your future. The what is simply to answer the question, what type of practice do you want to develop? Do you want to focus on, for example, any subspecialties within podiatry? These questions will help serve as a blueprint for your future goals and also assist you in how to market your new endeavor. So advance the slide, please. Step 2 is all about the money. You need to finance this endeavor. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Next slide, please. The first step is to put together a business plan. Now, there are plenty of online templates. If you just Google business plan, you're going to find plenty of online templates that you can use for the development of your plan. At the very least, you need to produce what's called a pro forma, which is essentially a lighter version of a business plan that's going to help you predict your revenue and debt projections. Next slide, please. Aside from predicting your revenues, you need to also outline your costs. You need to include everything like the cost of setting up the practice, its equipment, your leases, your electronic health record, as well as your medical and office supplies. What you're doing here is you're essentially trying to build a crystal ball to show lenders how your plan is going to produce profits. Next slide, please. As far as the lenders, you should really try to work with banks who specialize in medical professional lending. Now, you may have to shop around for this. Your pro forma needs to be conservative in its figures because experts like these lenders can see right through unrealistic projections. Now, this is going to take some time, but use your waiting time wisely. There's a lot of other work that needs to be done simultaneously, which I'm going to cover in the next several steps. Next slide, please. Step 3 involves shopping and purchasing your equipment as well as recruiting your very first staff member. You know, in today's technological age, it makes absolutely no sense to try to purchase equipment using the bargaining power of you alone. Now, I have no financial stake in this company, but I strongly urge you to look into DocShop Pro, not only for your big startup capital equipment, but also for your ongoing medical supplies. Here's an example where the bargaining power of one is essentially enhanced by the bargaining power of thousands. You'll be able to purchase the same medical supplies at much less expensive rates because you're leveraging the purchasing power of thousands of your colleagues. And again, I have no stake in this. I just truly believe that it's essential in purchasing these medical supplies in that manner, particularly as a startup practice. Next slide, please. You also are going to have to be purchasing things like your electronic health record, your billing platform, capital equipment like treatment chairs, radiology equipment, surgical equipment, vascular testing machines. You also naturally need things like a phone system. And lastly, you're going to be recruiting your very first staff member. Next slide, please. Make sure that in this endeavor of recruiting your staff member, that your interview process is buttoned up. Always try to hire for attitude. You know, your practice needs someone who is affable, courteous, empathic. You can easily train them for the nuances of podiatry. That's the easy part. Also, make sure that you're compliant in the interview process. You know, there are laws that govern this task. For example, you simply can't ask certain questions during the interview, like age, race, religion, disabilities, etc. Before you engage in this interview process, make sure you're well versed in those laws. Next slide, please. And you'll naturally need to set up the important platform of medical record documentation and charting. Naturally, I'm a bit biased here. You know, long before I became a principal of Nemo Health, who owns the electronic health record TrackNet, when I was a consultant, I always emphasized how important it is to use a podiatry-specific platform and not just a platform that caters to all specialties. This ultimately makes your charting much more compliant and efficient. TrackNet, as many of you know, is a podiatry-specific EHR with fully integrated charting, billing, and scheduling platforms. It intuitively understands the workflow of podiatrists and makes charting that much easier. There's also an optional software known as Speakeasy, which works through voice commands to create highly unique chart notes very quickly and efficiently, and utilizes all of the LCD verbiage, that's local coverage determination verbiage, that the auditors look for. As you all probably know, charting right now is a very ominous task because it's under such scrutiny by auditors. We could spend an entire evening talking about that. Next slide, please. And lastly, step number 4 is preparing to open your practice. And if you'll advance to the next slide. There really is several parts to preparing to open. Along with your accountant, you need to decide how to incorporate as a legal entity, as well as obtain your tax ID number. Incorporating as, for example, an LLC or a C Corp or an S Corp, you really need to discuss this with the accountant, because it's that type of entity that's going to help protect you as an individual. It creates a layer of protection between your practice and things that can go wrong in your practice and you personally. You'll also need to begin the somewhat daunting credentialing process with payers. The credentialing process is often time consuming, so you need to get a good head start on this task. It could take several months to become credentialed with all the major carriers. Next slide, please. You'll need to also begin putting together your blueprint for how your practice is going to run. Even though it might just be you and one other staff member right now when you first open, now is the time to develop policies and procedures, and certainly compliance documentation. You need to make sure, for example, that you're compliant with HIPAA as well as OSHA, as well as documentation. This is another area where you might want to bring in experts and outsource the construction of these policy manuals. And naturally, you're also going to need to purchase insurance. You need to purchase medical malpractice insurance, as well as business insurance, general liability insurance. Again, try to stick with those companies who really understand podiatry. Next slide, please. And then, of course, you need to begin your marketing endeavors. And I'm going to really let Rem cover most of this topic because he's the expert. But suffice it to say that I'm a strong believer in the fact that good and effective marketing is literally the only thing that you will ever do that costs you nothing. The reason I say that is because marketing isn't a cost, it's truly an investment. If done correctly, your marketing will produce a positive return on that investment. So never look at marketing as a cost. Next slide, please. And lastly, it's wise to never go into this project alone, starting a new practice. Much like you need the help of accountants and attorneys, don't be afraid to recruit business coaches and financial planners and investment advisors very early in your career. You know, before I turn it over, I'm going to just share a quick personal story with you. When I was in my last few months of my residency program, a financial planner came to speak to all of our residents, all of the residents. And I really took a liking to this gentleman, and I felt that he really knew what he was talking about. He was not actually much older than me at the time, and he was really just starting out himself, but there was something about him that I knew and I trusted and believed in. I became his client back in 1986 as I was beginning to open my doors, and today we remain very, very close friends. And what he emphasized to me back then were two very important points that I believe in and actually lived for the past 35 years. And I'll share them with you now before I pass this presentation over to Greg. He told me this. He said, John, the pathway to your future financial success is going to be much easier if you just do two things. First, immediately before you start practice, commit to saving a certain percentage of your earnings, no matter how little it might seem to be. With this type of discipline and the power of compounding earning, you're going to thank me many, many years from now. That's the first thing he told me. The second thing was, always strive to live beneath your means. And it's so true. You know, so many people live at or above their means, and as a result, they can't weather the storms that periodically occur. I think we can all agree that 2020 was a serious storm. And as I work with many doctors, the most vulnerable of them were those who were living at or above their means. Doctors living below their means went through that 2020 storm really with very little financial stress. Those were the two pieces of advice that Andy gave me 35 years ago that I wanted to pass on to you. And I'm actually going to add one more that's very relevant to launching a new medical practice. I want you to always consider needs versus wants. Before rushing out and buying expensive equipment, I want you to decide whether it's a need or a want. Too often, young practitioners, those starting a practice, will rush out and buy elaborate equipment that might not be needed for a year or more. Buying expensive equipment, you know, if you're going to be buying expensive equipment, what I would do is actually recommend doing a cursory needs assessment for 90 days by simply keeping a log of patients who you absolutely would have used the equipment on if you had it, and what the reimbursement would have been. Just 90 days. By doing that, you can then fairly accurately predict the return on the investment of that piece of equipment should you purchase it. You might discover that the equipment is actually merely a want and not a need. And by the way, this is why you see equipment often being resold not long after someone purchases it. Now, on the other hand, always remember this: if you need something, you pay for it. whether you buy it or not. If you need a digital x-ray machine, if you need a vascular testing machine, by virtue of that 90-day needs assessment, do not hesitate to purchase it because you're paying for it whether you buy it or not. You're either paying for it by purchasing it or you're paying for it by the lost revenues that you're accruing. So those are my last pieces of advice. And Greg, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thank you so much, everyone, for your attention.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. That was great. And it's a perfect segue into kind of what we'll talk about here as we move into the next section. And as a reminder to everyone, don't forget that you can post questions over to the right and utilize the chat. And we've also just posted a poll out there as we go along into the next section here. So in the poll, in that one, if you look over to the right for anyone that's still kind of fresh to this structure, the live storm, click on the polls. And the question was, are you planning to start a practice this year or open a new location? And you can log in there and post your answer to it as we go. So up next, we will talk about supplies, financing, and capital equipment, the configuration options, and delivery. So when it comes to setting up a new practice, you definitely have options. Every physician opening a new practice has several choices for who to do business with. When you're looking at those options, these are the typical factors we see physicians work through as they decide where to purchase. So why are we here? New clinic setups are an expensive and critical piece to your success. Trying to buy everything online from 20 different suppliers can result in more time, mistakes, unexpected costs, and frustrations. Work with a company that specializes in new clinic setups. They should hold your hand, give you plenty of options based on your needs, and like John said, help you understand the time frame for when certain pieces of equipment are typically needed, depending on the current structure and what your patient flow looks like. Shipping times and lead times are just as critical as price, and getting the best price isn't always helpful if the products show up a month after you open your office. So why new practices are different? With new practices, vendors should do the cost analysis work for you. You shouldn't have to do all the work. Instruments, for example, are an item you should request some samples. As you're buying these all from zero, and they're a large investment. Quantity and the pricing can vary greatly, and that's the same with DME, certainly as well. We'll talk more about financing below. That first order is going to take time, especially if you're thinking about having a big kind of comprehensive order. So having a consultant help you will ease the time and the burden of getting that all configured for you as you set to launch. Look at options like custom logos to maximize your branding and get your name into the community. So when it goes back to kind of the setup, ask yourself, what do you want, like John said, versus what do you need? What's really in the budget? What's mission critical? This can vary greatly based off your patient load, whether this is a new location, a brand new business, and based off your needs. You don't have to buy everything up front, just like John said. We love selling lasers, for example, and all kinds of ancillary revenue-driving equipment, but don't skimp out on some of the basics first, just like your podiatry chairs. Every patient's going to sit in them for the next 10 years or more. Ask about warranties on the chairs. We recommend 5-year warranties. They're a huge value add. Autoclaves, for example, or tanks. Questions, do you want a manual door or automatic? If you're truly starting from scratch, more than one piece of ancillary equipment might not make sense from a minimum viable practice standpoint. Maybe it goes to phase 2 and Q4 based off your year. Remember, pandemic reminded us cash is king. So some additional things to keep in mind, start as early as possible. The closer to opening, the more challenges you'll potentially face. The questions you should be asking are lead time, confidence in that lead time, delivery options, white glove installation versus curbside drop-off. So what are some of those key items to communicate? Both your target open dates and your construction lease dates, whether or not financing options have already been explored, and if you have any plans and set dates for an open house or grand opening party. All of those exact dates are important timetables and exactly what you need to have a successful launch. Right now, the delivery and lead times, for example, are more dynamic than ever. For example, Midmark specifically is experiencing never before seen lead times on autoclaves and all of their equipment lines. Most overseas built products are facing delays in air transit and boat transit. We've seen a lot of boats sitting at ports for weeks on end. The pandemic has changed a lot, and it's not looking like it's going to reset really for another year. For supplies, you don't want to be treating your first patient and not have what you need when you need it. A lot of people are shipping to their house if they need to and kind of get that configured and ready ahead of time. Remember, not all freight quotes are equal. White glove versus inside versus curbside, all those logistics matter for the delivery. For example, if you can't lift a 400-pound chair, we definitely recommend white glove delivery. So start the financing process as early as possible. We're seeing companies get much tighter than they used to be. We have a lot of options we can refer you to, but local banks and friends and family are also certainly options. Fair warning, specifically, is most institutions requires personal guarantees right now, even though you're a business. Because as one doctor, if you leave, the business doesn't have revenue. This surprises a lot of physicians, and so that's why we recommend you start as early as possible. We provide the physicians we work with an interactive workbook to help with the new practice setup, since there's so many moving parts, broken down into each section of your daily supplies, your instruments, DME, disposables, your cash pay, and all those capital equipment sections itemized by category. For example, we can create a custom cost analysis and make recommendations on brands and quantity for the opening, all based off the number of treatment rooms. And we have a really deep bench on DME with tons of brand options. We can help you navigate which ones offer custom logos, for example, display setup, samples, and coordinate across all the different manufacturers on your behalf, depending on which styles and variations you like. And when it comes to capital equipment, we've definitely got options and a wide variance in price points. We have the largest product bag of all capital equipment providers available in podiatry. For example, if you're wanting to do a lot of surgery and that's part of the plan for the practice, X-ray image quality is important. We recommend 20/20 or maybe Tiger View. They might make the most sense for you. But if you're less convinced with surgery and image quality, A2D2 is going to be the most affordable X-ray option. We can give you the options, the guidance, what a lot of physicians are doing at their practice and what we see some of the successful ones recommend, and then you can make the choice. We're here to help. There's no cost to using DocShop Pro. We were founded by physicians, for physicians, and new practice setups are a big part of what we do. We're here to help you set up yours. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to Rem Jackson, a founder and CEO of Top Practices, a company dedicated to helping physicians maximize productivity and profitability. Rem is a fellow of the AAPPM, a renowned national speaker, author, and member of the Podiatry Hall of Fame. Rem, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Greg. Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. And you can advance the slide. Thank you. By the way, I did not know you had that workbook with all of the, the checkbook and the checklist and all the things that you need to do when you're starting a practice, or really just have. That's marvelous. So I highly recommend everybody take advantage of that. That's great. Really like that. Actually, I'm going to check in with you later. I want to learn more about that.
Sounds good.
I know the folks that, the folks that I know that work with DocShop Pro are, they're happy. They rave about the customer service. So it's great to be on this call with you and the folks from DocShop Pro, but and especially my good friend, Dr. John Giuliana, who I hold extremely high regard, as I know everyone else does. So, all right, let's get into this. What I want to do is talk about your mindset for just a little bit before we get started, because here's something that I know. I know that it doesn't matter that you have all your ducks in a row. It doesn't matter that what I'm going to talk about with marketing, or you've made the right purchases, or you understand your budget. If you don't have your mindset on straight, we spend a reasonably large amount of time in top practices making that point and trying to help everybody just stay on track. And as John said, if you're prepared in many ways, and he of course talked about living below your means, but if you're also ready for the storms when they come, they don't knock you off your game. I mean, they certainly tested everyone in the last 12 months and continue to test us, but they don't take you down. And so my favorite quote I've ever heard, and was shared for me one time by a teacher that walked up to me after I gave a speech. She said, "Rem, I think this quote was something you might like." And she was right. "In times of change, the learners will inherit the earth, while the knowers remain beautifully prepared for a world that no longer exists." Next slide. We are in a period of rapidly changing circumstances, and we need to be learning and growing, especially now. What worked last year is going to change this year. Marketing, there are fundamentals always open. Just suits only work if they're open. This is another quote that I really tried to find out if I really was the first person to say this, and the best of my research, I am. Money doesn't make you happy, but being happy can make you a lot of money. If you're starting out in practice now, and I can see the list of folks that are on this, and some of you aren't starting out right now, you're veterans. But the fact of the matter is, you don't arrive. Your boat never comes in. Your ship never gets to the dock. You don't get happy when I do this, when the staff is perfect, when I have X amount of dollars, or whatever that number is. You'll get there and it won't be enough. Money doesn't make you happy. There's one circumstance in which you do. If you don't have enough money for food, shelter, or safety, and you acquire enough money to get food, shelter, and safety, you're a lot happier, a whole lot happier. After that, all the way up to Jeff Bezos, there's no correlation between money and happiness. But if you prioritize being happy now, enjoying your day, choosing patience rather than anger or frustration, working with your team, coaching and training, that can make you an awful lot of money. Basically, it clears the decks for you. Next, please. The thing I want to say is everything is mindset. Everything you do is mindset. As a spouse, as a parent, as a friend, it's all about how you see things. Next, please. And so you have now in front of you, all of you, everyone that's listening to my voice, myself included, have an obstacle in front of you, the thing that's bugging you. And if you want to know what it is, what wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning with your mind racing, that's your thing. That's your obstacle. Now and Ryan Holiday is a great author. He wrote a book called The Obstacle is the Way. And it basically says just that thing that's bugging you the most, work the problem, get advice, get help. Like John said, if you need experts, get experts. Solve the problem, go around it, go over it, go under it, go through it, or find out it's immovable and cannot be changed. And then what you do is you build another road, another direction. The obstacle is the way. It will get you through. And next, please. On the other side of that rock, every single time, at every moment in your life, is this. There's a rainbow, there's happiness. Once you've conquered this, you become stronger and better. Next, please. And I believe that the experience that we've had in the last year is going to make all of us infinitely better. So what we're going to do now is talk about marketing. We're going to talk about building and growing your practice and your patient volume. That's one of the key points of leverage. There are three. Tonight, I'm going to deal with this one, which is patient volume, the number and quality of patients that are in your office every single day, and the pipeline that is booked in appointments are coming in. We get that number through high-level quality marketing and customer service. And one note for you, everybody has their own particular number of patients that they see every single day. You will know what that is for you, and it's different for everybody. I found the sweet spot somewhere around 32 a day, depends on you. So for some of you, you think that's too many, others think that's all. Whatever it is for you, that's what we're going to focus on. But this number is important. 20% of those patients in your office every day, if we're doing our job with marketing and business development, they should be new patients. Next, please, because new patients are the absolute lifeblood of your practice. And I'm going to point out and try to make that case for you why, if you think about your new patients, especially on a regular basis, that they'll carry you through the rest of your career. Now, patients only can come to you from one of four places. This is it. They come to you from the internet and all that's involved in that. They come to you from referral sources around your practice, both medical and non-medical referral sources. They can come to you from your own internal list, that group of people who know you, like you, trust you. Active patients, inactive patients, really inactive patients, anybody that's requested information, your database, your list. And the last is the community, things that you might do out in the community, marketing that is more, broadcast oriented out to the whole community that can bring in people inside your marketing pipeline. Next, please. So since 2008 in top practices, my method of marketing, I call the 4 pillars of marketing. Internet referral marketing, the green pillar, which is shoe leather marketing, because somebody, now, normally I say not you, doctor, someone else that you employ, but for some of you, you are the whole shooting match and you have the time. If you're starting out your practice, this should be you. You should be out meeting people. I used to say shaking hands. I'm never doing that again. It's a filthy habit that should have been eradicated before all of this, but it is making those relationships, nurturing eyeball to eyeball, seeing people and building that and letting them know you are, you consider yourself to be an extension of their care as it relates to their patient's lower extremity needs. The next one is internal marketing. That is where we have your list in a good quality database that can allow you to communicate on a regular basis. And then finally, external marketing. This is what people used to think of as marketing. It could involve sponsorship, advertising. Next, please. Lots of different things. But I want to go through and really say, before you begin any journey, the great Stephen Covey in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People said, start with the end in mind. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, but then you don't know where you are. So first thing is, what is your brand? Who are you? Now, this involves simple things like making sure that you have a color scheme, you do have a logo, you look good. Don't spend a bunch of time on that. Just, accomplish it quickly, get it done. But more than what is your brand, who are you? What's your mission? How do you see your practice? And are you going to be a very general podiatry practice, or would you rather, for instance, see heel pain every day? Would you rather see a lot more wound care? Some folks don't want to see another wound as long as they live. Others live for it. It all comes down to you. Runners, like them, don't like them. Know this before you start, because it's going to affect how you do all of your marketing. What would you rather see each day? There's 2 things you should take into consideration. Number 1, what's most interesting to you? What do you really like as a doctor, as a podiatrist? And secondly, what's really good for your practice's financial health because it reimburses well. And then I've been asking all of my top practices members this question this year. What would mission accomplished be for you in 1 year? I'd like you to think about this, write it down. And this is really nothing more than 1, 2, or 3 sentences. If it's longer than that, you aren't doing it right. You got to boil this down to the absolute essence. By this date, at the end of the year, like by the middle of, this is almost the end of March. So by the end of December, New Year's Eve, what could you say was, what? Good. 2021, mission accomplished. What would that be? Next, please, because you're going to need to know if you're going to build the plan to do it. So let's talk about the internet. So look, There's 4 pillars in marketing. None of them are more important or better than the others. However, the internet is one that I believe, especially as a new practitioner, you ought to prioritize pretty high. And it's just so great. I will say this. You talk to a lot of quote unquote marketing agencies or companies, and they really have this opinion that it's all there is. And that's just not the case. There are 4 pillars, not one. But with web-based marketing, internet marketing, you want to make sure that your local search is really excellent. That is, all of the directories that have you listed, you've taken care of all of that. There are utilities that'll help you do that. One is called Yext, yext.com. It straightens out all this stuff that's not right and fixes it. Some of you don't have much of a footprint, but you don't want, where you practice for 2 years to be what always seems to come up because your previous practice actually did a decent job of getting you out there online. You want your new practice to be the only thing that people are going to find when they see you. And then you want to get in the habit of asking for and receiving high quality reviews online. There's nothing more important than your online reputation, and getting comfortable saying, well, when someone says thank you, saying, well, thank you so much. We'd just love to see more people like you. If you would you mind going online? We can give you where to go to give us a good review, a 5-star review. We'd really be grateful. Start now and have a goal of getting one high quality 5-star review every single week of your practice for the rest of your life. You need a great website with good search engine optimization and analytics. You need to be careful when you're making a decision. There are cheap options in podiatry that are actually well known, and they can be a very bad decision to do that. I'm not in this session going to out any of those, but if you're really stuck with questions around that, you're welcome to email me. And Nick, would you do me a favor and just type my email address into the chat bar, rem@toppractices.com. So if you want to connect with me, I can talk to you about it more. Just try to steer you the right way. But be careful. One way to do this, ask people, not just me, ask people that ask your mentors, ask your friends, and find somebody that is, as John said, podiatry specific, not just somebody that does everybody in town. Though I have learned that there are reasonably good internet digital agencies in most places now. There's a lot of good folks out there, but you need to do your homework. And then, like it or not, you've got to be on social media. Why? She's on social media. In podiatry, we really look at the woman in the family that is responsible for the health care of the family. Fair, not fair, always the case? No, predominantly yes. She's the one keeping an eye on everybody, watching her parents, watching his parents or her, whoever, certainly the kids. This is our sweet spot, and she is all over social media. You can see the list there, and every single one of those matters. Getting on there and being active. One of the things we've really developed in the last year at Top Practices is a marketing calendar that allows you to comfortably, easily, and with no real concerns, post every day on social media. You need to do it. It's how it works. You can get into Google AdWords. There's a case to be made for that. Certainly Facebook advertising, which also connects to Instagram advertising. You want to be really good on both platforms. It's a good deal as a rule. And people over 40 are on Facebook, people under 40 are on Instagram, and they matter. You want to get into Google advertising now and get help with that. But you want to get out of it as fast as you can. Organic search is where you really want to be when you're online. When that's content, that's doing your own videos, getting them out there, writing, taking photographs of you and the staff having fun. I mean, it's not hard. It just needs to be. It can be tedious, but it will reward you remarkably well. Next slide, please. And so that's the first pillar. The second one, as I call, is shoe leather marketing. This is referral marketing. Now, here's an important thing. During the pandemic, this has really suffered. In fact, most practices have had a drop in their physician referrals because their physician referrals are going through their own pandemic nightmares and really struggling. But that everyone's emerging from this, including our partners in healthcare. But here's the thing: you want to see enough of them. You want someone that's going out and making these visits, because you need to know this number: 10% of the practices that you go out to try to make friends and help them, only 10% will ever become a solid referring source for you. So you want to look at communicating with on a pretty regular basis. And this time consuming, as you can see, this takes time and effort, at least 100 in a month, because that's going to turn into 10 solid referral sources for you. If you've got someone that's seeing 150, that you can expect 15. And this means sending you at least one patient a week. And 250 is where you can expect to see about 25 referral sources, which is awesome. Now, my members are all over the board with this, but I want you to consider 100 as your list being your minimum number. Next, please. And so let's talk about that. Why is this important? I wanted to ask you this question: how much is a new patient worth in the first year that you see that patient? Now, and then what are they lifetime? What's the lifetime value? And I understand these are people, but I'm going to just break this down financially for a minute. What is the lifetime value of these patients to you? So next slide, please. I want you to think about this. When I ask this question of groups of doctors, I'll hear anywhere from $200 to in the first year to $4,500. John and I have talked about this numerous times, and we believe it's around $1,200. The average new patient to a podiatry practice is going to produce about $1,200 of income and collections to the practice in that first year. But let's make it 450, which I believe is a very conservative number. And if you're listening, you think, no, I think it's 200. Well, use that. If you think it's 1,500, use that. Now, if we go with a real conservative number of 450, that means if you get a referral source that sends you one new patient a week in the course of that year, that's $23,400 that you're going to be able to generate in income. If you get 5 new referral sources sending you one patient a week, it's $117,000 added to your bottom line. That's serious money. 5, and at 10, then we're looking at about $234,000 if they're just referring to you on a regular basis. Next, please. This really, really adds up. And that doesn't even take us to what the potential is for lifetime. I'm not even going to address that today, but it can be remarkable, the value of referrals and new patients and marketing in and of itself. Now, on the internal marketing pillar, look, you need to know who your patients are, and you need to maintain a relationship with them. And you do that by managing your list, that list of your patients, active, inactive, really inactive, really carefully, putting them into a database that can be used to manage this system. We use several in top practices that I can recommend. You've heard some of them are, one that we don't personally use, but is probably the most widely installed in the country, is called Constant Contact. It's just a way to communicate via email. Now, here's the thing. You can email your patient base. You must email them at least once a week. Pardon me, not at least once a week, once a week. No more, no less. And if you do it right, one of those should be your monthly newsletter. One of those could be information about heel pain, if that's what you're focusing on this time. One could be a testimonial, if you're allowed to do that in your state. One could be a great recipe that's healthy, or tips for stretching. Make it interesting, make it good. And then, of course, the other side of this, beyond the outbound reach to that, is creating an exceptional experience. It's not enough that we are satisfactorily taking care of our patients. They should walk out of your office and think, I love that place. I love those people, and become a raving fan, because raving fans tell other people. Next, please. They just do. And when you get a fan that knows that it's one of those mavens that just talks to everybody, you're off and running. The last pillar is external marketing. That's what I would call paid advertising. That could be broadcast, television, radio. I've got many, even in some places still some print newspapers, though not a lot anymore. Sponsorships, 5Ks, races, things like that. But I want to say this to your new doctors: don't start here. This is expensive. This has a low return based on the reason we end up doing it and why it matters is because the numbers are so large. They're just massive. But if you don't have a spectacular website that's going to catch them when they come in, make sure we don't blow it there. If you don't have the ability to know who they are and then communicate them ongoing, and you haven't worked on your staff and your training, then don't do this first. We get there, but we don't start there. Next, please. Okay, so what can you do, doctor, to personally market your practice? Now, again, if you're a brand new doctor, you're going to do more of these things than you probably want to, and you want to get out of the business of doing it as quickly as you can. I always recommend that you hire a part-time, in some cases full-time. Some of our practices have 2 or 3 full-time marketers, but in the beginning, you'll want to find a ray of sunshine personality person that can just make this stuff happen, run your marketing calendar and keep it organized. And that's probably you in the very early days when we're really on our shoestring budgets. But here's what you can do always. Today, even you veterans, pay attention, know your numbers, watch these things, and then contribute content. You have to get good at, even though you'd rather probably peel your fingernails off, you have to just be able to start doing simple 1.5-minute videos, get them out there, come to Top Practices and look at our videos on our website. Up at the top, I think it's called Learning Resources. Click down and click videos. You'll see tons of me, tons of Dr. Wishney, tons of Tina Del Buono, just doing good quality online videos, short, sweet, to the point. And then, this is for everybody, don't get distracted. Never let this get stale. Next, please. The hardest part of all of this is just the fact that it's tedious. It's just, you got to do it again. You got to do it again. You got to do it again. And that's what we try to encourage and work with each other on in Top Practices to make that easy. But none of this comes easy. You have to pay attention. You have to be intentional. And here's the thing, next, please. Just saying, oh, I'm just going to do good work and let my work speak for myself because my patients can absolutely tell people about me. Wrong. They are awful at that. They won't even remember your name after 8 months because they just got too much stuff that's in their heads. You cannot rely on them to do it at all. And you have to work through the problems. You're going to hire a good staff. They're going to quit. You're going to find out this person that's been with you for 20 years is stealing money from you. You're going to have problems. But the great Stoic Marcus Aurelius, he's quoted in the book, The Obstacle is the Way, said, our actions may be impeded, but there can be no impeding our intentions or dispositions because we can accommodate and adapt. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances the way. What stands in the way becomes the way. And this is my favorite. The cucumber is bitter, throw it away. Stop telling everybody it's a bitter cucumber. Take a smell it, just throw it away. There are brambles in the path, go around them. Next, please. I just love that stuff. We all need to just get over it and get on with it. And then the great Napoleon Hill said the Mastermind Principle, 2 or more people actively engaged in the pursuit of a definite purpose with a positive mental attitude constitute an unbeatable force. You can't do this alone. Next slide. You'll have what my brother calls an Amtrak derailment in your head. You must deliberately seek the company of people who influence you to think and act on building the life you desire. You can do that. Next, please. And so I invite you to join me in Top Practices and let us help us do that. Minimally, you can come to the Top Practices website, or you can go to Amazon and buy these 3 books and sorry, John, I don't have yours up there, and I know you've got one coming out. I do apologize for that. John, look up John Giuliano on Amazon and buy his book. It's excellent. But this is a book by me.
It's being released this week, Rem, so
Sorry,
no worries.
This week?
Yes, it hasn't been released. Thank you.
That's great. Oh, I've read it, folks, and it is an absolute, you must get John's new book. He wrote it with Dr. Jeff Frederick as well. It's incredible. But in the meantime, you can get Podiatry Prosperity by me, how to market, manage, and love your practice. The Podiatry Business Solution by Dr. Peter Wishney, which is, it's a reference book you will never put away, and a brand new one called Truths from the Trenches by Tina Del Bono, our practice management consultant. And I'm telling you something, you want to sit down and read a book that makes you go, yep, that is it. Holy cow, that's exactly how it's like when you're trying to run a practice. She tells the stories, and then she gives you ideas on how to do it. Next slide, please. And as I said before, come to Top Practices. You can't do this alone. You can join our mastermind group for a low monthly subscription rate, and then work with me directly and all the other doctors that are doing this. Next slide, please. Yeah, you'll be glad that you did. I just want you to know that. Remember, money's never going to make you happy. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. But being happy, next slide, can make you an awful lot of money. So thanks so much. You know, the biggest decision you can make is get going. Congratulations on making the decision to either open and buy a new practice. We did this webinar because as John and I were talking about this, and I was talking with Nick from DocShop Pro, in the last year or two, we have seen more new practitioners open up cold or buy an existing practice and hang their shingle out there and get started than we have seen in the last 5 years. The future of podiatry is so bright, I can barely stand it. I need sunglasses. So, you know, thank you so much, everybody. It's been a delight to be with you tonight. And with that, I think we're probably going to take some questions. I'll turn it back over to you, Greg.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, it looks like during that, we did get a question, a specific one here from Daniel Spencer. I don't know if you can see this, Rem. I'll read it out if you're able to see it. But can you start a PLLC with a virtual business address if you're starting a practice in another state and don't yet have a physical address yet? I guess for you and John.
John, do you want to?
Yeah,
I'll let John.
I could tackle that. You know, I did stay at a Holiday Inn last night, but I'm not an attorney. So I'm going to first preface the answer by saying always consult with your attorney, because your state's laws may vary. But typically, if you're starting a business as a limited liability company or corporation or a limited partnership, you're going to need to have what's known as a registered agent address in the state that you're registered to do business. A registered agent is simply somebody that your business designates to receive important papers. Think of things like documents that the government may be sending you, or heaven forbid, lawsuits. You have to have a registered agent. So you don't have to have a physical address, but you do have to have a registered agent, and a PO box does not suffice in this instance. So speak with your attorney about your specific state, but there are ways of doing.
Thank you,
I'd
John.
like to jump in on this as well. Yeah. And I'd like to say, you can't market a practice if you don't have a physical location, unless you're a kind of a virtual visiting thing, but you're still going to have a location, and it cannot be a mailboxes, et cetera, UPS store or anything like that, because without a physical location, a phone number that's dedicated to that, Google is just, they're not going to, they won't list you. They won't make it work for you. You will not get any traction at all. So it's very hard to do without a credible source. Like, for instance, if you happen to be a doctor that's going to be, you know, not actually be somewhere physically, then you could actually use your home address if you had to. And I suppose you could potentially think about that as a workaround, but you're just better off to have a physical address. That's the way Google runs this, and they're you know, you don't want to get in the sandbox and in trouble with Google. So get an address. Don't share office space with someone and have their do an address and you do it too. That's going to be very complicated.
Great information. Thank you both. So it looks like we're about at time. Looks like Daniel has a follow-up here, maybe. Oh, yep. Thank you. Yep. So thank you both for that. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be with us tonight. We really appreciate it. We'll be posting a replay of this event, and we're excited to work with you in any way that we can. So be safe. Have a great night, and we'll be talking with you again soon.
Bye, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.